I love this story. Douglas was a guy, by the way, who said, I think Lincoln related to me because, like me, he grew up in humble circumstances. That was, of course, a little generous of Douglas, since Douglas grew up in even worse circumstances, enslaved, and had to resort to various strategies to teach himself how to read and to find people who would help him learn to read and to write, but escaped from slavery and became a great anti-slavery orator and writer. Um, Before I go on with this encounter between Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass, I feel the need to define some terms, maybe not for your extremely erudite podcast audience, but I've realized there's a bit of confusion that many, many people have. Frederick Douglass is not the guy from the Lincoln-Douglas debates. There's a different guy, Stephen A. Douglas, who was a United States senator who debated Lincoln in those debates. Frederick Douglass is a different person. Douglass, by the time Lincoln was an adult, they were not too far apart in age. Douglas was a little bit younger. By the time Lincoln was an adult, Douglas was a politician, I should say. Douglas had escaped from slavery and was writing books, was giving speeches, was sometimes being chased by mobs off stage, and was running a newspaper, which he used to comment on events and to bring an abolitionist view and a black point of view to politics. He became involved in politics, which not all abolitionists did before the Civil War. Some of them found the United States so corrupted by slavery they didn't even want to vote. They didn't want anything to do with the Constitution. They burned copies of the Constitution. Douglas began that way, but changed his mind, got involved in politics, and then decided eventually to support this new party, the Republican Party, which was an anti-slavery party that was not nearly radical enough for Douglas, but he felt that they were the ones with the best chance to win. And being pragmatic as Lincoln was, he supported the Republican Party. And when the Civil War came, when Lincoln was elected as the first Republican president, and when the South began the war in defense of slavery, Douglas became a kind of member of the loyal opposition. He's playing like two incredible roles, which I think a lot of activists often have to do. There's an outside game where he is constantly criticizing Lincoln for not going fast enough. From the first minute of the war, Douglas understands that a way to win this war is by freeing the slaves, the enslaved laborers from the South, which will take away their labor and create soldiers for the Union Army. Lincoln took a year and a half to get around to that, and Douglas is constantly criticizing him in public for being slow, for being a laggard. He even uses the phrase Negro hatred. He says that Lincoln represents Negro hatred. But at the same time, he's kind of playing an inside game. When the Emancipation Proclamation finally came in early 1863, Douglas became an army recruiter, helped to recruit soldiers, but then became frustrated again because he promised these black soldiers they would get equal treatment, and they weren't getting equal pay or equal promotions or anything else. And he went to the White House to protest. There were many things that are incredible about this meeting. One of them being that it happened at all. Douglas came in the company of an important senator, so he had somebody to vouch for him. But he came into Lincoln's anteroom. This was a time when if you wanted to see the president, you couldn't send an email, you couldn't call ahead. You would show up and wait on him. And the anteroom is full of people, and there's so many people there, according to Douglas's account, that they spilled out of the anteroom, across the hall, and down the stairs. Lincoln's office being on the second floor of the White House at that time. And there's this ceremonial staircase that goes down to the lobby, so you can just picture people going all the way down the stairs. And they're all white, as Douglas recalled, and he was a black man who had publicly lambasted the president for years. And yet within 2 minutes of him sending in his card, someone says, Mr. Douglas, you're next. And he gets in to see Lincoln, who admitted to some of the charges against him. He said, I've been slow to provide equality to black soldiers. I will admit that I may have been slow for lots of things, but I'm a politician and I have to build political support for things. And I'm dealing with a lot of white people in the government who resist anything that approaches equality for black men. And so I'm doing everything I can step by step, and I'm working on it. And in fact, within a year or less, Congress provided and Lincoln signed equal pay for black soldiers, a law that would make that the law of the land. and they were promoting black men into officers' positions and so forth. So they had, I think, a constructive discussion. And they were two men that we think of as principled, which they were, standing for the highest American ideals. But they were also pragmatic, or just to use a simpler word, they were practical. They were asking what is politically possible at this time. Douglas decided, unlike other abolitionists in the 1850s, that the way to strike the strongest blow against slavery was to support this party that he did not fully agree with. Lincoln understood again and again and again that while he personally opposed slavery all his life, there was only a certain amount that he could do at any given time, and he would try to accomplish that thing, and had a kind of philosophy of leaving the rest for later. His philosophy, he talked about, of course, often the Declaration of Independence and its promise that all men are created equal. And in one of the Lincoln-Douglas debates against the other Douglas, he has a line in which he says, this was not perfectly attained then. It's not perfectly attained now. It is never perfectly attained, but it can be approximated in ways that add to the happiness and well-being of people of all colors everywhere. And he's saying that we do the best we can, and then we have another election and we fight over things some more, because that's what a republic